Nirvana Prakarana, the Transcendence, Chapter 13, the story of Mithyā-Puruṣa. The horizon turned amber as the sun made his exit behind a small hillock. The fleecy clouds above were gradually getting transformed from the bright gold to reddish brassy hue. An ancient banyan stood in that plain surrounded by rocky hillocks. Hundreds of birds gathered on the banyan, which offered its benign canopy to a record area of 5.25 acres. The winged creatures had made this tree their home for many generations. It was very difficult to make out the original trunk from its offshoots. The banyan in one such tree, which goes on spreading by the phenomenon of rooting in its branches. So much so that many times one feels that it is not one tree, but a group of interconnected trees. The banyan has not only been associated with Indian psyche for millennia, but has been used to compare it with the inner world of mind by our sages in the scriptures. They observed that ahankara, or the I-do-ness, is quite similar to the banyan. The I, call it by any name, the ego, the self, etc., remains a driving force for all activity and being. All actions are motivated by and are performed for this entity. And yet, most of us hardly know anything of this great enigma. Religious lore in general, and Vedantic literature in particular, has tried to throw light on this entity. While religion as such, of the Hindu or the Judaic origin, has tried to convince the practitioner that it creates a barrier between him and the God. And so they recommended its annihilation through surrender. This is only right, as the religion in general caters to the needs of common man involved with the day-to-day existence. Vedanta, however, is more direct, as it goes into the root cause of the problem. It tries initially to analyze intellectually and then to intuitively understand what this entity is, which has been taken for granted all along. During nididhyasana, or the states of meditative contemplation, they discovered the truth, and in their compassion for the struggling humanity, which was needlessly suffering from their point of view, they tried to use stories, similes, and symbology to help the suffering alleviate the so-called problems through their own effort. They started with very logical questions like, who is it that experiences pleasure and pain? Who is this entity I that is behind all experience and knowledge? An Upanishad begins with the following mantra. Keneshitam patati preshitam manaha kena prana prathama praiti yukta keneshitam vacha vimam vadanti Chakshushrotram kaudevo yunakti. Willed by whom does the mind fall towards the object? Being directed by whom does the prana that precedes all proceed towards his duty? By whom is this speech willed that people utter? Who is this effulgent being who directs the eyes and the ears? The spirit behind these fundamental questions is that unless we find out for ourselves who is it that suffers, enjoys, acts or understands, it is useless to solve the problems. Paradoxically, we see this happening with us and around us all the time. A man spends most of his time in acquiring wealth, but in the process does not have any time for enjoying it as he is totally involved with the acquisition. Life appears to be just a mad chase without the experiential answer to the fundamental question, who am I? Trees, especially the Ashwatha and people, have been used as similes in Vedantic literature. This may be due to the fact that our rishis were nature lovers and had come to many valuable conclusions by observing it carefully. That must be because they had come to realize that man and nature are parts of the non-dual existence and naturally have many things in common. The Bhagavad Gita begins a chapter with the shloka, Urdhvamula madhashakham ashwatham prahuravyayam chandamsi yasya parnani yastam veda savedavit. There is an indestructible Ashwatha tree having its roots upwards and its branches below. The leaves are the Vedas. He who knows it is alone the knower of Veda. If one looks at the above shloka superficially, it appears strange. How can a tree possibly have its roots upwards? But when we understand the symbology, we discover a great truth through this verse. In Vedantic symbology, the upper and the internal directions refer to the subtler aspect, and the lower and the external directions refer to the grosser aspect of the same non-dual existence. The Ashwatha tree represents the samsara, which is subject to constant change, characterized by multiplicity. The origin is subtle. Any tree, big or small, has its beginning in a seed and the lone tender sapling. Yoga Vasiṣṭha keeps repeating over and over again that the seed of samsara lies in the Saṃkalpa, or the tendency to contract the consciousness. Vedas in the above verse refer to the knowledge in general, or the faculties of knowing in particular, which are ahankara, chitta or memory, buddhi or intellect, indriyas or senses, and the body. If one knows this truth experientially, one becomes the knower of the process of knowing. The shloka suggests the seeker to go back to the root. Some common experiences can help us understand the meaning of the verse, at least intellectually. Richard Bach writes of an episode in his book Illusions. In a small town one night, while walking back to their plains, Richard asks Donald Shimoda, the reluctant Messiah, as to why at all we choose to come to this world. Instead of replying, Don asks him to enter a movie theater. Richard settles down and starts enjoying the movie, forgetting why he is there. While the movie advances further, Don asks him, why is he in the theater? To which Richard replies that it's a good movie. Don again asks as to why the movie is good. Richard replies with annoyance that he will reply later. The Donald, that is, continues to whisper dramatically that it is only an illusion. Richard is so identified with the movie that he is unable to understand the import of Don's question. When they come out, a very interesting conversation follows. The only problem we as human beings face is identification. We identify with the body and become miserable. Pain, pleasure, sickness are natural for the elemental body, while the misery is due to the identification with it. Misery, which is psychological, is at all levels from body through senses, mind, intellect and ego. And the funniest part is that all of us know innately that pleasure and pain are transient. They are never permanent. Childhood comes and goes. Youth appears and disappears, the dotage advances and retreats. However, the entity who witnesses all the events happening in life remains. It is due to the witness that we are able to remember them. Besides the gross body, we have worlds of thoughts and feelings, each his or her own. Tamas or lethargy is the first obstacle we face in life. We tend to remain self-complacent. Our country ails from this illness. What is it that helps us break away from the barrier of lethargy? Having come out of lethargy, what goads us towards achievement, excellence, success, anxiety, disappointment, anger, and most of the emotions? Experiencing the pains and gains of rajas or activity. What cajoles us towards nobler qualities like compassion, love, and harmony? In spite of all this, what inspires us to seek something which transcends even sattva, say enlightenment, fulfillment, or whatever one chooses to call it? There is only one entity behind all inspiration and activity, ahankara. Literally, ahankara means I do-ness or identification with any activity, be it spandana or pure vibration or thought or gross actions. If bodha or pure awareness falls into such identification, ahankara is formed. And with this ghost of ahankara, the samsara or the worldliness with its multiplicity and complications get created. Ahankara is a ghost because it is really not an entity but an activity. And this activity, like walking or running, can be slowed down or even stopped. This particular point is elaborated by the story under discussion. Vasiṣṭha said that it is not necessary to afflict oneself with misery like the Mithyā-Puruṣa. In a nook of Cidākāśa, where there is no universe, a certain male personage arose. He was clothed in Māyā and was full of Ajñāna. He rose like the imaginary city in the sky or the water in a mirage. He went by the name Mithyā-Puruṣa, unaware of his own growth and the Chit or consciousness that manifested itself as if distinct from the universe. He contracted the Saṃkalpa of creating the highest, infinite Ākāśa and created it. Then, in order to set a limit to it, he constructed an enclosed abode with the idea that the Ākāśa was pent up in that habitation. His desires were bound by and identified with that limited Ākāśa. In course of time, it became dilapidated and gave way. Then the Mithyā-Puruṣa felt miserable at the disappearance of the Ākāśa. Having finished his lamentations over the Ākāśa house, he created a well and entered it. He grew attached to it, as he did not have any disturbance from the outside. As before, he became disappointed when the well too became useless and old. Then he created a new pot, enamored by its beautiful structure, was chained to it by affection. This continued with many creations, and he worked, got attached, lived and died with them. When Rāma asked for the esoteric meaning of the story, Vasiṣṭha explained that Mithyā-Puruṣa is the ahankara arising in the void. The Ākāśa is self-existence, all full and endless. In it, the idea of I arises like the sense of touch in vayu or air. And this void of ahankara fancies itself as protecting the Cidākāśa of the Atman. Then encased in several bodies symbolizes the well, etc., which are created by itself. It subjects itself to repeated pain. With the body, it contracts itself further to Bhūtākāśa, thus distancing oneself from the Atman. The indestructible Ākāśa cannot disappear when the limiting pots and wells are destroyed. The Ākāśa continues in their presence as well as their absence. It is only through direct spiritual vision that the transcendental Brahman, Chinmatra or pure being, and Sat or awareness shines everywhere. But the Ahankara is destroyed like a pot. There is really no such thing as the birth and death. Only Brahman ever is and manifests as the universe. Ahankara is the source of all accidents, non-eternal, dependent and discrimination-less, the seed of all sins and of Ajñāna, of birth and destruction. Destruction of this Ahankara is the Jivan Mukti state. Herein, Yoga Vasiṣṭha gives a great hint on the mechanism of Ahankara. First of all, by calling Ahankara as Mithyā-Puruṣa, it is suggesting that Ahankara is not a permanent entity because Mithya means that which appears but is really not. Then it says that Mithyā-Puruṣa tries to limit the infinite space into smaller spaces repeatedly. Putting both these facts together, we can safely conclude that Ahankara is the act of contracting or focusing the pure consciousness. As already discussed in the earlier story of Punya and Pavana, when the pure consciousness gets contracted to I, and I is formed, and along with it duality. Pure consciousness is like a light falling on all objects in the room, while the I is the identification with one or two objects. The I is also a ray of pure consciousness, but it imagines that it is the protector of awareness. It is natural that the infinite appears threatening as it does not have any boundaries. It is beyond the mind and senses, and hence it is unknowable and is awesome and mysterious. While the finite gives a feeling of security, as the finite falls under the purview of I, mind and sense or body experience. Because of this reason, it appears convenient, but actually the act of focusing is just an obstinate habit like any other habit. Spirituality is nothing but being aware and conscious of this habit. It is a change of vision and attitude. Being aware of this, the Rishis said that the only thing required is to wake up from this sleep of defective visions in the methods of jnana. And on waking up, one finds that everything is only that, the friend, foe, relation, as well as the universe. In a palace of a king, there was a room full of mirrors. Somehow, a dog got trapped in it one night. Next morning, its dead body full of blood was found in a corner. The whole night, it had fought with its own reflection. The human story is not very different from that of the dog. Whatever exists is that non-dual reality. But in our ignorance, we take the world to be different, and I to be something else, and the reality to be separate self, while the fact is that the difference is only an appearance. There was a Sufi saint by name Shilbi. He used to say that he had many preceptors, but 3 were most important. The beacons 3. Sitting on the bank of a fast-flowing river, he was enjoying the reflections in the water mirror. Attracted by movings of steps behind his shoulder, beheld a dog restlessly thirsty approaching the water. The object of his curiosity was plainly scared as it saw another of its own kind staring at it with anger and awe. But the thirst was more menacing as it made its throat raw, lapping the water, discovered no dog but its own image it saw. He learned that the world with all its beings and things is nothing but one's own reflection, and the good and the bad was only a feeling, getting brewed in the mind, and the world is means of escaping from the torture of one's own desires and fears that need projecting. In need of piede terre, exhausted from a journey on foot, he entered a village one night to find it asleep, devoid of all mood. He found a man trying to break the door of a shop to loot. Approaching the man, he asked whether he can allow him to rest his foot. Looking into the eyes of this Sufi saint, the man said, "You appear to be a holy man, and I do not want to hide my race. I am a real thief, a professional thief, not knowing and polish or lace. You can stay with me if you want, till you want, at my place." Hearing these words, the saint's eyes felt the blood rushing onto face. Noting hesitation in the man's mood, the thief smiled and again said, "I understand you are one of those who practice religion for bread, without really being religious, that needs real authenticity in head. Do not worry, I shall take you to a place offering the poor bread." The words awakened the man from his stupor, for he insisted to be with the thief, to stay and observe for over a month, and to shatter the myth that thieves are fallen men on ground, like worms that crawl and writhe. For in face of failure, ever hopeful and joyous, he found this man with. He learned to be authentic in his thought, word and deed, never to lose trust through hope at whatever cost or in need. For he was on a journey without end, his being was the only steed. It dawned on him that the way to heaven itself is heaven indeed. Seeing his own image in every being and thing, he shed his pettiness. With authenticity and hope, he turned his face away from otherness, and the sun of compassion and love arose, bringing in godliness. With that, he roamed around, spreading fragrance of happiness. Reaching a town, he heard of Junaid, who had led many towards the light. A wish arose in to meet him and share his experiences and delight. Seeing him come, Junaid's wife tried to leave the room in flight. Junaid said that Shilbi was absent, there was no need for any fright. Hearing Junaid's approval, Shilbi fell from the oneness due to pride. Fall made him cry like a small child, afflicted by some chide. Junaid's wife laughed as her husband made her leave his side, and the laughter made Shilbi learn that his ego still gave him a ride. The laughter continued to echo in consciousness, reminding him that unless one has the total awareness, one can fall off the rim, as the ego only needs a reason and can even create out of its own whim. The teacher's three made Shilbi a smokeless lamp that could never dim. There is a wonderful thought from the book Illusions, written by Richard Bach. The original sin is to limit the ease, don't. Ahankara is the mistake that limits the infinite through identification, though it cannot be and should not be called a sin. In Bhakti tradition, the creation and obviously the Ahankara, which is at its root, is considered to be Leela or play of the Lord. Only on becoming aware of the root can one think of understanding the complex tree called this universe. and most surprising thing that comes out of such awareness is that the root, the branches, the leaves and all exist not without the vitality of the reality which is one without the second. And the fact is, it only is.